Hey, y'all, I am so excited that you decided to join us tonight. We're about to get into it. We have an amazing group of women that took the time out tonight to lean in, talk about the transformational work that they're doing across the country to make sure that system impacted women have opportunities and remove all those obstacles. Let's get into it. Okay, good afternoon. It is Sheena, the CEO of the Clean Slate Initiative, and I am so excited to welcome you all to our first ever Women's History Month webinar for CSI. And today we are joined by some incredible trailblazing women who all have contributed to reforming our nation's legal system. We are thrilled to be curating a discussion about their experiences and the importance of advancing reforming policies to positively impact women across the nation. Now, we have some very interesting group of women here. We have attorneys, we have a former DA, we have a business leader, and we have a techie who used to be in politics. And so I'm really excited to bring these women together. I'm gonna do a quick this or that with these women just to get us into a flow. So I'm gonna start off with Amanda with this or that. Summer or winter?
Summer.
Lenore, morning or evening?
Morning time.
Hillary, salty or sweet?
Definitely sweet.
Topeka, do you watch shows one episode at a time or do you binge watch a whole season?
Binge watch a whole season.
And my this or that is, would I rather fly or have a super strength? And I would say super strength. And so with that, this or that, I want to let you know we are joined today by Amanda, CEO of the Code for America. The Clean Slate Initiative is proud to have Code for America as one of our longstanding partners as we advance automatic record clearance policies across the country. And before Amanda was CEO of CFA, she was the COO for one of the largest justice departments in the country, the national political director during the 2016 U.S. presidential election or presidential campaign for Secretary Clinton, and chief of staff in the U.S. Senate, where she worked for nearly a decade. Thank you for joining us, Amanda.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. And Dr. Topeka, founder of the Ladies of Hope Ministry, is also with us today. Dr. Sam founded WHM, an organization that offers resources and support to end the poverty crisis and incarceration of women and girls. But that's not all. Dr. Sam is also the founder and president of several other startups and serves on the board of directors for many organizations, such as the Marshall Project, United Justice Coalition, and she's a strategic advisor for the Responsible Business Initiative of Justice. I got to take a breath. And Dr. Sam is also system impactors, which inspired her to dedicate her life to fight for dignity, decriminalization, and incarceration of women and girls. Thank you, Dr. Sam, for being here.
Thank you for having me.
And we would like to welcome Hillary, another good friend of mine. Hillary is the founder and executive director for The People, a national nonprofit working with prosecutors to review past sentences and safely bring people home from prison. In 2018, Hillary drafted and secured the passage of AB 2942, which is the first prosecutor-initiated resentencing law in the country, and is now spearheading its implementation. And last, but certainly not least, someone who is his longtime colleague, comrade, and friend, who I've learned a lot from in this movement, Miss Lenore Anderson is with us today. Lenore is the co-founder and president of Alliance for Safety and Justice and the founder of Californians, right? That's how y'all pronounce yourself, Californians, of Safety and Justice. She's an attorney with extensive experience working to reform our legal public safety systems. And I want to thank you all for taking the time to join us. And I know folks are ready to hear from y'all, so let's just get into it. So when we talk about the criminal legal system, we cannot overlook the massive impact the system have on women. As you know, myself, I am directly impacted, and I see so much how it impacts women and girls in our communities. And we know that the women's incarceration rates have been growing at twice the rate of men over the past few decades, with a significant proportion of women who are incarcerated being held in jails, a large number of women who are not convicted but awaiting trial, often unable to afford bail. This has serious implications for their families and future employment prospects. So my first question goes to Hillary. Hillary, you were previously a prosecutor for San Francisco District Attorney, and now you're leading for The People to bring people home from prison who can safely be released. You have a unique perspective in the work of criminal legal reform. Can you share why it's important for prosecutors to be a part of this work?
Definitely. Well, thank you, first of all, for having all of us gathering this group of brilliance. I know this is going to be a great conversation. So why prosecutors? The work that we're all doing, right? The work that we're all called to do to transform the justice system is a huge job. And it's an all hands on deck kind of situation, right? Like we need every single actor involved. It took years and years and decades of laws to get passed, billions of dollars to flow into counties and states, capital projects to build prisons. And it required prosecutors to facilitate the transfer of human beings from the court system to behind bars and jails and our prisons. And so, as I said, that it really does require every single actor in the justice system to be involved. And certainly it requires prosecutors who, from my perspective, really are one of the most powerful actors in the justice system, right? 30,000 plus prosecutors across this country making hundreds of decisions every week that will change the trajectory of people's lives. And so as some of the reforms had been happening, and I kind of came into this space, one of the actors that felt very left out of the equation, right, which felt like, why are they going to get off and not have to be involved, were prosecutors. They were written off as not being helpful because they hadn't been helpful before, and that just felt like we were leaving a lot on the table. And so our work is really a call to action to prosecutors. Their job is supposed to be protecting victims. Their job is supposed to be making our community safe. And, as we sit here with this group of women in Women's History Month, and as you said, Sheena, with the fastest growing population of women in prison, and with women, as you all know, really suffering really unique challenges during their incarceration with the rampant, sex assaults, and 60% of women behind bars that are separated from their children. Our call to action and why we're so focused on prosecutors is that they took an oath to protect victims, and they took an oath to make our community safer. And what better way to make our community safer than to bring people home from prison, reunite them with their families, and begin to rebuild the fabric that really has been decimated by decades and decades of the criminal legal system that we have today. So that's why prosecutors.
Right. So Hillary, I want you to kind of just also break it down for folks, because people who, they only understand prosecutors to put people in jail and maybe protect folks. And like for the people has a very unique a role right now of getting people out of prison. But can you give us like an example? And I just want you to like break it down so folks really understand what you are doing in practice. Because when you broke down to me around the VCR piece, that opened my eyes. And so I would like just for our audience, people to understand, actually, what do you actually do? Just when you because when you just say get out of prison, we're all trying to get people out of prison, but I want you to just speak more to your work if you can.
Right. So it is very, there are so many pathways in this country to get a person to prison. But on the back end, there are very few ways for somebody to get out, right? You can go through an exhaustive appeal process, which doesn't usually yield any kind of relief, or you can wait and pray for the governor's pardon pen to come your way, or you can rely on an ineffective parole system if you're a state that even has parole. And so there are very few ways for people to get out. And with prosecutors having so much power to send people to prison, this was kind of how the idea came. And I think the best example would be a story. Mr. Alwyn Smith is a prime example of the work that we do and why we believe that this is really something that can be happening across the country. So Mr. Alwyn Smith was given a life sentence for a residential burglary. I think it was a VCR and a backpack that was taken under the third strike, right? And he had exhausted all of his appeals. He was not eligible for
Wait,
parole.
hold up. It went real fast, Hillary. I need people.
Yeah.
He has a life sentence for a VCR and burglary and taking a backpack. You said that right?
Yes.
Okay, I just want to make sure it wasn't a glitch.
I said that right. And so when he was in prison, he had commendations from correctional officers. He had letters from wardens. He had become a minister. He had become a counselor in prison for helping young people with substance abuse. And there was literally no way for him to get out unless he was able to get a pardon from the governor. And so prior to the law passing here in California, advocates would come to the DA's office and say, "Can you help us?" And the DAs would say, "I would love to help you, but unfortunately, my hands are tied. There is nothing I can do." So passing laws like this literally untie the hands of prosecutors so they can actually be involved in bringing people home. So when this law was passed and we went to the DA with this case, the DA did have a mechanism and an ability to bring Mr. Alwyn Smith home, use their discretion in a new way, right? And granted, it's a different way for prosecutors to think because yes, they are used to sending people to prison, but they also can be involved in an injustice that is existing in our prisons, which are people like Alwyn Smith, who's serving a sentence that is, no one is getting a sentence like that today. He's been in for 26 years. He hasn't gotten any violations in decades. He's done everything right. He's got a family waiting for him on the outside. There's no justification for us to keep spending $130,000 a year to have him behind bars. And so this is the work that we do. And there's thousands, hundreds of thousands of Alwyn Smiths across the country that have been rehabilitated, that have been redeemed, that could come home. And we just need prosecutors to participate in bringing people like Alwyn Smith home.
Thank you, Hillary. It really speaks to the power of a prosecutor, their ability to not just prosecute, but maybe untie some things, and then humanizing him and talking about, just the amount of money that our tax dollars go towards a year to incarcerate him, $130,000 a year. Thank you. I know we'll be coming back. I want to go over to Lenore. Like Lenore, and if folks know, Amendment 4, Lenore was a great advisor to that campaign that restored voting rights to 1.4 million people. That is when I met Lenore. And I don't know, like we started in 2016, 17, whenever we came together, and she's been in force. And Lenore, you bring a unique perspective about criminal legal reform. Also in your book, she's an author, In Their Names, The Untold Story of Victims' Rights, Mass Incarceration, and Future of the Public Safety, where you examine how the focus on victim rights in the U.S. often perpetuates mass incarceration. Can you share more about your work with Survivors Speak and how it ties into our goal of reforming the criminal legal system?
There's a really powerful underlying myth that has been one of the core drivers of mass incarceration policy in the US. And that's the myth that the more we incarcerate, the more we're helping victims. This is a myth that, has been bandied about in political circles for literally decades. We've heard politicians from across the political spectrum use that frame to advocate for tough on crime policies. What our organization does is try to unpack that myth and reveal a very different truth about what's happening on the ground, what's happening to most victims of crime, especially under the era of mass incarceration. So let me just give you the perspective of how tough on crime has really hurt far more victims than it has helped. First, when it comes to understanding who's most harmed by cycles of violence and crime, there's a lot of myths just in that alone, right? We live in a media era where attention to victims who are white, victims who are elite is way disproportionate compared to their actual rates of repeat victimization and chronic victimization. And so the media drives attention based on race and socioeconomic lines to a very small percentage of mostly elite white victims. And that media attention has driven how law enforcement resources have been utilized, right? So the vast majority of folks who experience crime and violence are not recognized by the justice system as suffering from violence. They're not given dignity or given respect. And more often than not, they don't get any actual services or support to recover from violence and harm. So we see what we kind of refer to as a hierarchy of harm, a hierarchy of whose harm matters the most to the justice system in terms of protection, and what that means for folks who aren't protected by the justice system. Let me just give you a few of these statistics, Sheena. The 90% of people who are hurt by crime and violence do not get any support in recovering from crime, right? No access to victim compensation, no relocation assistance, no access to therapeutic support, and no support from the justice system, right? We know that the justice system isn't very good at investigating crimes or closing homicide rates or sexual assault and other violent crime rates, especially in communities of color. And so we see a justice system that has been spending its resources in a way that's not appropriate given the experience of crime and violence in communities across the country. So most victims aren't actually helped in the first place. The second reality of our justice system is that we have spent so much money building up a justice system that is better at surveillance and incarceration, especially in urban communities, than it is at actually providing trust and dignity, that we see real lack of trust from communities toward the justice system. That's a lack of trust that is foundationally built into tough on crime, right? The more that you spend on extreme incarceration and surveillance practices and policies, the more you're actually reducing trust and reducing the likelihood that that justice system is going to be able to support most victims. So our organization has been trying to do this about something about this, for a while. And let me just tell you a little bit about what we've learned. We started back in 2012. We started surveying victims of violence, and we were specifically interested in talking to the most common victims of violence who are least likely to get help from the justice system. So we've done surveys of representative groups of victims across the United States and in all the large states. And what we found is the majority of victims of crime do not think that tough on crime works to stop cycles of harm and violence, do not think that extreme sentencing is a good idea in terms of improving public safety, and actually have much more support for rehabilitation, reentry, violence prevention, mental health crisis assistance. These are the kinds of things that if you were to actually ask people who are directly impacted by violence and crime what they want from their public safety systems, they would say those things. They wouldn't say maximum punishments, maximum surveillance and incarceration. And so it's really been, for us, important to lift up those voices and experiences and say, hey, listen, if the ostensible purpose of the justice system is safety, then we ought to listen to and take the leadership from people who've been the most harmed and the least helped, right? And that's really, in essence, what we've been calling for in terms of new safety priorities.
Yeah, that's powerful. I would say I ran a women's retreat for Florida rights restoration a few years ago. Well, back during Amendment 4. And as I was gathering women hearing the stories, at least over 60% of the women in the room were victims of crimes before they actually got incarcerated or got arrested. And they didn't get those type of services. And I think that kind of created a whirlwind of them being impacted by the system. And then most recently, Lenore, I just want to know your if you have a comment on this. I had just received the email yesterday from the Fines and Fees Justice Center, which you may have received too, that the Department of Justice Office of Victims of Crime has a proposal to allow states to deny compensation to victims of crime who owe fines and fees or restitution if they have a criminal record.
Yeah, Sheena, a couple different thoughts about your comments. One is, we talk a lot at Alliance for Safety and Justice about what we call the victimization to incarceration pipeline, right? There's something that's unspoken that the public really needs to understand is when we ignore the needs of victims of violence, we are reducing the likelihood that they will be able to be safe and become stabilized, right? And so we really think of this right to heal as essential to advancing public safety policy, recognizing who's most likely to be hurt by violence and crime, providing real support in terms of trauma recovery and help on the front end is actually crucial for reducing cycles of victimization to incarceration and improving safety. And then, to what you're raising about this issue of victim compensation, a lot of people don't know. Every state in the country has something called victim compensation. Okay, what's the purpose of it? Well, it's supposed to be money for victims, especially victims of violence, to get emergency help, relocation, hotels, when you've got to get to safety, compensation for lost time at work if you've suffered a violent injury. Well, studies have emerged over the last few decades that have demonstrated that victim compensation is not very accessible. And it is, in fact, the policies that are in place are discriminatory in terms of who gets access to victim compensation, right? Folks, there's all kinds of discriminatory laws that exclude people from getting victim compensation. One example, victim compensation applications can be denied if you're considered contributing to your own victimization. Okay, just one example. There was a shooting in Ohio where a man walked into a bar, at midnight and shot. There was a number of people who were killed in that. There was many more who were injured. Most of the people who applied for victim compensation were denied because they were drinking. Now, this is someone who walked into a bar, but because they were drinking, it was considered contributing to your own victimization. Okay, so that's an example of how arbitrary and discriminatory our victim compensation laws can be, and how vulnerable it leaves people who are in crisis in their lives and need help to get back on their feet. Well, we are among many organizations that have been pushing real hard to improve access to victim compensation because we see it as a public safety issue. And the Federal Office of Victims of Crime is, for the first time in many decades, proposing reforms to change access to victim compensation. And what we're asking organizations to do is to read those proposed regulations and get organized to make sure that those regulations provide as much access as possible. And among the things that we are advocating to do, Sheena, to your point, is prevent states from excluding people from getting access to compensation, either because of prior records or because of current debt as it relates to fines and fees.
Thank you so much, Lenore. You definitely left some gem droppers for me. Victimization to incarceration. That I never heard that term is very much true. And I think this is a great to lift up to show that the work that we're all doing collectively in this reform movement does not mean that we do not focus also on people who need to get healing as well, who have been a victim of crime. And I think we all want that. And with that, I want to turn it over to Topeka, Dr. Sam. You also bring a powerful perspective to this work as someone who is system impacted. You lead the Ladies of Hope Ministries doing dynamic work. Your women is like, remind me of Verizon, like tell a friend, tell a friend, tell a friend, like everywhere I go, they're like, we're part of the Hope Ministry, like they just show up. And so as an organization that offers resources, support to end poverty, crisis, and incarceration of women and girls, I want to just thank you for your work, your dedication, and your sacrifice. But I'm really feeling like, Topeka, like you're saying, listen, I could do this movement work and be a businesswoman and do startup. You was like, let's get this bag as well that also has social impact and helping also financial stability for women and girls. And so you lead many entrepreneurial efforts such as TKS Ventures, LLC, My Fresh, and Torion Detroit. Can you share what led you to these efforts and the impact that you've seen since you've been starting these ventures?
Sure. Well, first, Sheena, thank you so much for including my voice in this powerful group of women for this Women's History Month. And I'm happy to see some of you and happy to meet some of you. I want to first add, though, a thought about, first of all, the victimization, the criminalization, that was so powerful. First time I've heard it, gonna use it, but we'll quote you, Lenore. But also, many of us who have been through the carceral system are victims, right? And a lot of times we don't look at the criminalization of poverty, substance misuse, sexual trauma and violence as crime, and it is. And so many women specifically that go to prison, in my opinion, many have been criminalized because of poverty. They have been victims of many types of abuses that led them through incarceration. And so I'm happy to hear a lot of the work that's being done, especially around prosecutorial misconduct, and also making sure that prosecutors are part of the healing process and problem, or solution. Um, and my reason, shifting quickly, my reason for starting my other ventures was while, I created this nonprofit as what God moved me to do while I was incarcerated. Nonprofit is a business, right? We have all created businesses. However, what I've learned in this business of nonprofit, that it just felt like I was begging, or am, I'm still in it. I still lead my organization. And it feels like I'm always having to share the most traumatic experience in my life in order to raise money to do what everyone knows is the right thing to do, right? Help women get out of poverty, help women to transform their lives. And the more and more I began to build my organization and wanted to scale my organization, I felt like, well, Topeka, you created these 6 amazing programs that to me could have been separate businesses. Prior to my incarceration, I was an entrepreneur. I owned several businesses and led the union for Amtrak. And was division chairperson there for New York and DC. And coming through incarceration and getting into nonprofit, part of it was because of people who were mentors to me told me this is the direction I should go, part of because I had a conviction. And so as I began to build, I had personal issues with the kind of nonprofit system, but that's a conversation for another time. But I was like, well, you know what? I feel
I
like
think
I'm
we
going
all
to.
know that sister people on this call.
I saw everybody saying that.
We all been there. That's for the next. That's for a different discussion. We'll do that on Second Chance.
That's right.
We all fundraising together.
Exactly. And so as I began to, quickly kind of, change my approach to my portfolio funders and meet, uber wealthy people that were doing good, right? The more conversations that I had with them, it was like, you can do good and do well. And I'm saying to myself, well, Topeka, why are you sitting around toting on every single panel to produce and create equitable opportunities for women, yet you're not creating an equitable opportunity for yourself? That while building my legacy, and by name and by the work that I've done is great, but I would much rather create generational wealth for my family. So that way my nieces and nephews, the 8 of them, and my 2 godchildren won't have to experience some of the things that I did or so many other people that I know, because they'll be set up to do good and do well. And so as I began to start to create other businesses, because I am a serial entrepreneur, clearly, it was like, what else am I going to do? Because my heart is in social impact work. I want to make sure that anything that I am doing is still going to support my community. And so that's where, My Fresh came in. It's a co-founder on creating, a fintech company that focused directly on making sure that previously incarcerated, justice impacted women who are victims of violence are given education, financial education, credit building, but also banking. Then it was from there, as I started thinking about real estate. And while we created the Hope House model, and those are single family homes, I ended up purchasing the house in New Orleans because at the time, the organization didn't have any credit and everything was falling on me. And I said to my board, well, if I have to carry the debt, I should also carry the asset, right? I should not just have the liability of something. I should be able to own this asset. And so I was able to then purchase the property, own the property, and rent it to the organization for the organization to do its programs. But as I started thinking about, the Hope House model, and while there are some people that need, co-living spaces, many people just needed permanent housing. They needed to get their kids back. They needed somewhere else that they can live. So what can I do? And as I started to try to find landlords, real estate brokers, and people that would rent to people with convictions, because we all know that there's barriers there, it became increasingly hard, but also noticeable that I could either sit here and beg people to rent to my people, or I can create something myself. So that's how Torian Detroit was done. And we were able to purchase, me and three of my partners purchase a affordable housing 30-unit project in commercial property in Detroit, which we will be opening in May. We're almost done with rehab, really excited. And thank you. Half of those units, we are making sure that justice impacted women are renters at affordable housing rates at fair market rate. And so that allowed me to still be able to do a project where, one, I am building wealth, but also doing well and doing good. And then TKS Ventures is 100 other things, look out for the lipstick line and everything else. But I just love, this isn't mine, but it's coming. But it's all of these things that, for me, it's important, one, as a woman and as an entrepreneur, that, we are providing and making opportunities for ourselves to show other women that it's possible. But then when you think even deeper, as a woman who is a Black woman who is previously incarcerated, and all of the strikes that are against me, period, as a one person, but all the opportunities that I have because of my network, because of my education, and because of my resources, that I am sharing this journey with other women, because it is so important for us to think more broadly than just what's in front of us. And starting my organization, many of the programs could have been their own little businesses. I know that because that's the way my mind thinks. But even trying to shift that has been difficult because people see it as a nonprofit. So even if I wanted to move and take the Speakers Bureau, for example, and make that a for-profit venture because women are getting paid for their services, that it's still been difficult because I would, one, have to raise startup capital and people don't want to give it. They would much rather give nonprofit. So again, that's like a whole course in my why. But I'm happy because I have found really a good balance in the work that I'm doing and have been able to create and build and share through our programs, but also the businesses that I've been able to create and continue to create that is also going to build my wealth. Because one day I want to be able to write the $2 million checks, the $70 million check.
The clean slate.
I want to be able to, right, I got you.
Clean slate.
I want to be able to do that.
And Topeka, I want to come back to you because I'm going to come back to all the ladies and women on this call, because there is something about being a woman leading organizations. And I want us, this first round is about our work, but then I do want to talk about like what it is like for y'all journey to actually lead a national organization that we're all doing. And there's a lot of tea, and I didn't send y'all wine for that conversation, but I want to come back to on that. And when you talked about the rent, just for a stat, we know that 90% of landlords use background checks to screen out applicants. And I will say that it is a hard feat. Even for myself, 4 years ago, me and my husband was denied rental application after rental application until we decided to get our own home. And really, it did not realize we was getting denied because of our record, because we're like, wait, we got all these other accolades and y'all denying us. Like, that's so long ago. And still even find a struggle as Clean Slate is looking for a permanent home. Sometimes we come around property owners who are like, well, who's going to come to the office? And what is the work that you're doing? So there's a lot of still stigma and this discrimination, even in us being leaders, business owners, to even house our own headquarters. So I want to move to Amanda. We could come back to that. So Amanda, we're living in a world where everything is tech, and there are a lot of initiatives and organizations that need support from Code for America, and a lot of things you could be working on. Let me just say, with tech being on the rise, you could probably be doing a million things, but you have been dedicating your work at Code for America to public safety and health initiatives, and also Clear My Records. I want to know, why is Clear My Records program one of your top priorities, and what are the future goals and aspirations for the program looking ahead?
Thank you, Sheena. And I too want to echo what folks have said on this call, which is being with such powerful leaders doing impactful work and hearing their stories and their connection to it is super inspiring. When I think back to my connection to Code for America, to public safety, I grew up in a place where it is one of the lowest income counties in all of the country. It's actually the highest prison per capita area in California. And so I grew up seeing more prisons than colleges or hospitals. And I grew up with an immigrant father and parents who were farm workers. And one of the things my colleague said the other day that really stuck with me is this idea that how do we cross the generation, and where my parents lived on defense so I could live on offense. And I think a lot about that when we think about generational change for folks, Black and brown folks, for women, for folks who are often left out. And so it's a real honor to be with all of you who are working to make our world a better place, particularly helping people get on offense. And so our work at Code for America, we believe that government can work at all levels and should work for everyone. And I mean everyone, even those folks who keep being left out. We actually, our mission is to make sure that we are using human-centered technology to alleviate poverty and advance equity. Central to that work is obviously in the criminal legal system. In fact, since the founding of Code for America, we've been working on automatic record clearance, which is now almost 15 years ago when we first started. And it's been a big priority for us, given the scale of the problem and our belief in the solution. So when you think about it, there's 1 in 3 people in the United States who have a criminal record that holds them back from jobs, housing, education, exactly what you were just saying, Sheena. And automatic record clearance, what it does is it rightfully ensures that the burden of expungement is actually at the system level, not requiring individuals to have to go to court to navigate a bureaucratic system, and whom many give up because it does seem impossible, whether it's financially impossible or just bureaucratically impossible to get through the system. We believe that anyone that is eligible should have their record cleared automatically. And it's completely possible. 15 years ago, we would hear that it was not possible. How would the systems ever do it? And we are now seeing, in partnership with Clean Slate, that we can do it, but it actually starts at the policy legislative level. So it is advocates saying we should be treated justly and fairly. We are eligible for record clearance. Why can't this happen automatically? So I am excited that at Code for America, we are in partnership with folks like Clean Slate all across the country who are pushing states to write automatic record clearance law, because it finally actually places expungement in the hands of the system. And so we've been working with about 25 states across the country. We've worked with Clean Slate to pass legislation in about 10 plus states that is designed for automatic record clearance. And for anyone who is tuned in and wondering whether it's actually possible to get to implementation where your record can be expunged automatically, it is. We've worked directly with California and Utah in the last couple of years, where 500,000 folks had their records expunged. And so this work is critical if we want people to, again, believe in government systems. But more than that, if we want to help people get on offense where we have thriving communities. And so anyway, I am just super honored to be here with you, and Sheena, in partnership with you on this kind of work.
Thank you, Amanda. And just for folks to hear, like, did y'all know there are about 18 million women in the US that have a record? 12 million of those women will be eligible to receive full or partial record clearance if all 50 states pass Clean Slate. So, Amanda, we're looking to you to help us get us there. But that is a lot of women. And we know usually women are the ones that are holding down our communities, our households, all the things. And that is a lot of women who have barriers before them.
A lot of women.
And I know we oftentimes see the highlights of the lives of advocates, but the grind to get there is not always seen. So I would like to actually go back. I think I'm gonna just start with you, Amanda, and go around. I want to say the reason why I picked the ladies that are on this call specifically, right? It is not just because you are powerhouses. It is not just because of the work that you're doing, but I have came to each one of you in my personal professional capacity to say, how the hell do I do this as a woman leader, a Black woman leader, leading a big movement that's going to have impact on millions of lives, and folks are counting on me. And all of you have created some space or some time for me to give me gems to say how to do this. I think one time when I was in California, I was going back to back. I met with Lenore, then met with Amanda, and they met each other at the bar because I was like trying to get all I could get in. And it's not an easy journey, you know, because especially just as women, we hold that emotion, we know the feelings, we know what it takes. I would love to just know what would be a piece of advice that you could give to a young woman advocate or leader across the country that you wish you would have known yourself. And I will start with Amanda. It could be anything because there are other women leaders watching this or aspiring to get here, or maybe just a young advocate.
Yeah, I think I will say the things that come at you as a woman of color leader is some of these things you don't expect to come. Like I have several times been told about the community I grew up in and how I should act given that. I've also been told like, can you stop talking like a CEO? And you're like, how am I supposed to talk? Or can you, in the political world, especially, I think I was really grounded in that when I ran for Congress back in my hometown. And one of my consultants said, listen, if you just didn't wear as big of earrings and maybe as red a lipstick, this might be a little bit better. And I remember I was like, if I say that to my mom, it's over. Right. But my point in saying that is we've got to make sure that not only are we at the table, but we're at the table in who we are. And I appreciate advice that I get. I try and take it all in. And at the same time, I think I got to be true to who I am. And in everything I do, one of the things I've always said is know your why. For me, why I ran, for me, why I'm at Code for America. Because if I know my why, that grounding does help all the challenges coming at me. So thanks for asking that question, Sheena. And the other thing I will say is the camaraderie of women leaders, of women of color leaders, keeps me up. Is why, Sheena, when you call, I say, yes, how do I meet you right now? Let's do it. Because I think there's not enough of us working together like this. We're often heads down. And so even in this call, I'm re-energized by hearing everyone's story.
Thank you, Amanda. And thank you for answering the call. As y'all know, I did my TED Talk, and Amanda had also did the TED Talk, I think the year before. And I was shaking in my boots, all things. I was like, honey, I would drive to your house, right? And Amanda and I only had the work relationship, and I was in California. My son, I think, dropped me off, and I was watching football. And we sat and talked, and it was a moment of connection. And I do believe that as women, we should create community for one another. Like I get my cup full when I'm with women, when I'm with you all and talking outside of all the work stuff, just knowing that there's another woman in the struggle or in the fight trying to help people. Thank you, Amanda. I'll pass it to Hillary. Some advice or something you wish you would have known.
I think that for me, it has been my advice would be not to be afraid of creating your own lane. I definitely in the sort of my path has been very windy, right? Where I grew up, I definitely thought that I was supposed to be a public defender. If I was wanting to help people in a Black and brown community devastated by drugs and violence, like the only place for me would be to be on the defense side. And so when I became a prosecutor, I didn't totally fit. But I was trying to see if I could create some change from within that system. And then when I left the DA's office and met Lenore Anderson, I also didn't fit and understand it all. And then this idea of working with prosecutors also didn't make sense. But for me, it did make sense. And it didn't feel like there was a lane. And it was the whole idea was just embracing the fact that even if I don't entirely fit into one exact box, that maybe that is a good thing. And so for anybody out there that is like, well, what's my lane or how do I fit? Or I'm kind of in the gray. That's a really beautiful place to be. It's a really beautiful place to be. And I think it's a lot of what we need in this country when we think about bipartisan work, or we think about places where different movements or sides can intersect. So that would really be my advice to anybody out there is that, if you don't got a seat at the table, you set your own. If there's not a lane, you create your own.
Thank you, Hillary. Topeka.
Well, I agree, and I was thinking the same thing that both Hillary and Amanda said. So that's good. I see why you chose this group because we're all aligned on so many things. So I would say, outside of what they said, as a woman, collaboration is so important. We are not each other's competition. Now, while I have never been from that school of thought because I grew up with a lot of women, I've had great friends, have great friendships. But I noticed in my space, a lot of women have been hurt by other women. And so therefore, it's automatic competition, right? There's automatic, this energy that opposed to trying to come together to see what we can do together because we are so much stronger together that we try to go against each other. So I would say do not compete against your sister, find ways to collaborate. I would also say, which I used to be guilty of this, try not to be the smartest person in the room. Right? I used to find myself always being like the smartest person, and that is not helpful for your own growth. You do not ever want to be the smartest person in the room. You want to be surrounded by people who are smarter than you, because that's the only way you're going to learn. And you don't want to be around a bunch of people who look up to you to the point of that they're not going to hold you accountable. You have to be around people that are definitely willing to hold you accountable. And then you don't want to be the wealthiest person in the room. If you're trying to get to a certain place in your life, you want to be around other people that can teach you how to get there. And if you've only got to a certain cap in your life, then you want to be around a bunch of people who want to be where you are. And that's only going to make you broke because then you're paying for everything. That's a whole other conversation.
Girl.
But you don't always want to have to pay for dinner. You know what I mean?
We like paying the bill, but not all the time.
Not all the time, right? Sometimes you want to fight for the bill with me, or automatically just go and split it. But no, really, I mean all of what I'm laughing because sometimes I'm still living some of these things. But truthfully, I think for me, it has really been when I've surrounded myself with people that I can aspire to be. That's something that I see in them. It's not necessarily what they have. It could be what they know. It could be how they talk. It could be, their life experience, something that is not familiar to me where I can learn. I think that has been my greatest tool, really, because it allows me to really align, learn, and build community with all types of people. And what you never want to do is just be known to just be able to be in one room. To Hillary's point, even if you're creating a table, you want to be able to create, tables that are inclusive and not just those that seem to just only fit you. So those are some of the things that I would share.
Thank you, Topeka. And I will make sure I still tussle with that ticket, that we do when we're together. Talk to each other first on who's going to pay. Lenore,
Yep.
you probably have a lot, and I would just want to give a memory, and maybe Lenore, you don't know this, and when we were running Amendment 4, it was very male dominated. I mean, my husband was leading it, and then all the advisors, all the consultants, and Lenore fly over from San Francisco, walk in the room with authority, and I'm like, I want that right there, just like that. Like, I'm not here to play with you boys, and she would say what she have to say, keep it going. And I'm like, who is this woman? And so I love to learn. I learned to love Lenore in that moment of that moment of authority. But I know, I'm assuming, I don't want to say I don't know, assuming that this didn't come overnight. And so what advice, or same thing I asked the other women, what piece of advice would you give to young women advocates, or something you wish you known yourself? Any gem you want to drop?
I remember meeting you, Sheena, and that was such a great experience in Florida and such a transformative campaign for the country. I would say a couple different things. One is it was, we already discussed it a bit, but people will always try and put you in a box. I think people always sort of like, oh, I know you're this type, or you're this, sort of characterization of a person. And I think it's just critical and important to always have your own center and always have your own North Star inside yourself that can break through that. Whatever people want to say about who I am supposed to be, that's their opinion. I'm driven by something that's deeper than that, and that's not something that other people can mess with, right? So I think just always having a strong North Star and showing up in service to that, North Star as opposed to other people's boxes, about you. I think two other things come to my mind is, I heard this phrase one time that just like, it was like a gift. It was like the land of no lives inside the the land of yes lives inside the forest of no. So you have this big, huge universe of mostly no. And if you're trying to get to yes, that's just one more no that you got to get through to get to the, to the island of yes. And so, if we think about social change and advancing, the social justice causes we all work for, we should expect to get far more rejection than we do acceptance. We should accept to get far more criticism than we do praise. We should expect to get far fewer initial supporters than we do people on our side for what we're trying to do. If we expect that, then when it happens, it's water on a duck. It is what it is. Thank you for your input. Thank you for your feedback. You're not going to roll with us on this. That's great. I'm still moving forward. So if you have a vision to get to yes, you can allow yourself to walk through a lot of conflict and a lot of negativity and stay the course. Last quick thing I'll say, and this was especially in my heart thinking about our initial collaboration, Sheena, on Amendment 4 in Florida, was the change that we are seeking is generations in the future, right? Literally, it's both deeply personal and not personal at all, because we won't even necessarily be here when what we ultimately are trying to advocate for comes to fruition. And if we can take the long view, it again allows us to accept the inadequacy of the present moment we are in, to accept the silliness of small-minded people and their ego-centered ways of being, and just like, yep, that's great, whatever. I'm looking for something that's way so far in the future that these small moments aren't going to take me down. So I think that'd be the last thing I say is keep your eyes way, way ahead of you, long view.
That has been so powerful. All that you all have given to folks today, given to me. The thing I would just offer is be your authentic self. Whether, I'm gonna come with my red lipstick, with my shirt that says I'm a grown ass woman, to the meetings, to the yard, with my long nails. I'm gonna just be authentically Sheena. And y'all know I'm the same way here or wherever I'm going to the White House. And I appreciate y'all bringing us, just coming today and not finding robbery. I know you all are busy, and it's our time to wrap. And I do want to make sure that we just go around, just tell folks how they could follow you on socials. We'll add the socials. But as an organizer, I believe we always have a call to action, and y'all have done a little bit of call to actions in there. But as we end this, the note I want to end on is each person, just whether it's a call to action to your organization or just out there to the field, and how to find your organization. Lenore?
AllianceForSafetyAndJustice.org, AllianceForSafetyAndJustice.org. I'm sure we have all kinds of social media handles that you can find on that website. Not my purview of strength. And, my call to action is, our values are organize, 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 right? We're stronger together. The more that people can come together and advance, policy reform, the more that we can win it. It's an honor to collaborate with all the organizations represented here today. I'm a fan of all of y'all. And so I guess my other call to action would be do what these folks tell you to do.
Great. Hillary, pass it to you, then Topeka and Amanda, and we sign off.
So we're forthepeople.org, and we'll share out the handles. I think one call to action for us is to join us. We're going to be launching kind of a big announcement coming soon on a women's initiative. We're trying to get as many women home from prison as we possibly can, starting in California, and then trying to take over the country and do this work. So we need as many people to support us in doing this, both on reaching prosecutors, building up reentry resources, and making sure that when people come home, women and men, that they come home and they don't just survive, but that they thrive. And if anybody out there has an in with any prosecutor, you've had a decent conversation with somebody, let us know. We will follow up with that prosecutor and see if we can take that one conversation and turn them into being part of the solution with us to get more people free.
I'll be calling both of you, and I know I'll be calling Amanda too. The Ladies of Hope Ministries is THELOHM.org. Fresh is MYFRSH.com. And social media is at the LOHM. Fresh is Fresh Community, and me at Topeka K. Sam. Thank you.
Any call to action, Topeka?
Everything everybody else said. Follow everybody's work, get involved. Support. Yes.
You could find us at codeforamerica.org. You can find me at amandarenteria.com. And always open to discussion and connection as well. My call to action is, we are living in a world that makes you wonder whether things are possible. And at a time where it makes you wonder whether things are possible. And what my call to action is to keep believing, because hope is a choice. And if everyone on this call didn't believe we can make it better, we never would. And so that's my call to action is you've got a lot of places to put your time, resources, volunteer energy, and the idea of following leaders who believe it can be better and are doing it to make it better. That's the call to action. Join them, believe on them, believe in the cause. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Again, ladies, thank you for participating. Thanks for everybody who's tuning in today. And my call to action is for the folks that are watching to take these conversations to your living room, to your kitchen table, to your colleagues. Bring another sister into space, talk to them about the work or what you're passionate about. Continue to turn your pain into purpose and let it fuel your passion. And again, thank y'all for supporting Clean Slate. Remember, 1 in 2 women will be eligible to receive a full record clearance if Clean Slate legislation passes in all 50 states. 1 in 2 women. Thank y'all. Ladies, thank y'all.
Thank you.